like to welcome everybody. So if you could, let's find your seats. Again, there's no assigned seating, so make new friends if you need to. Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to our 50th birthday party. Right? During the course of the evening, we're going to reminisce an awful lot. We're going to have a chance to talk to people who were really responsible for a vision that today we think is remarkably the YMCA of Catawba Valley, and it's now 2 beautiful branches, but the people who made all that happen are in this room tonight, those that are still alive, right? So I think what I would say is I want you to have fun tonight. There's going to be a very, very, very loose agenda. Going to be some storytelling. We're going to reminisce a bit. And probably the best thing for people like Jerome Bolick is I'm not going to ask you for any money tonight. But that'll come at a later date. But thanks. So now what I would like to do is ask Paul Kirshner to share an invocation with us. And then dinner will be brought out. Continue to enjoy dinner and fellowship. And then we're going to start promptly at 7 with our program.
Well, thank you to the staff of the YMCA for setting up this evening of remembrance and appreciation. I don't know of another organization that has done more for the fitness and the wellness of a Catawba County families than the YMCA. Thank you, YMCA. Let us pray. Almighty God, we do thank you for the YMCA across the nation and in Catawba County. We thank you for the Christian concept by which it was established and is now guided and inspired. So bless this food tonight, those who planted it, harvested it, prepared it, serving it, and bless all here who enjoy it. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Paul. Again, while dinner is being served, please take advantage, look at the collages that have been created. Those are, and we photoshopped the collages to be thinner than we really are tonight. So that's all Photoshop, I promise you. Alan, you'll appreciate that. You do a lot of photoshopping with photographs, right? But we also have a couple of poster boards. And one is of the Foundation YMCA, and one is of the Conover YMCA. And we want you to write a comment, make a note, some remembrance you have of the facility, because we want to put those in our lobbies and let that be part of our time capsule, so to speak, for the next 50 years. So during dinner, if you want to get up and walk around a bit, observe the photographs. We also have a center board that talks about all the people that have been CVOs, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later, and the CEOs and the recipients of the Adrian L. Shuford Award. So lots of great memories, and we want you to enjoy every single one of those. But most of all, please enjoy the evening, enjoy the fellowship. Hopefully there's some people maybe that you haven't seen in a while, maybe even make a few new friends. But thank you all so much for being here. We'll introduce the staff a little bit later, but this is your evening, so please take advantage of it. Thank you. If I can have everyone's attention, I'm not going to stop you from eating just yet, but on your tables, you're going to find an original marketing piece that looks like this. It's happening here. So please take a minute to look at that. Jerome Bolick was kind enough to share a few of these with us from his archives file, but there should be one on every table, but look at what Conover was initially intended, and it came to fruition, right? The other thing each of you have is the original rendering that the architect did, And it's mostly there except for the football field. And that's probably, could have been there, but those two things are worth taking a look at. And the one's a postcard, so take it home with you this evening. But please take a look at the original marketing piece. That's fabulous foresight to see what we've become. So we'll get the program started in a couple of minutes. While you're having dessert, I think we're having dessert, we'll start the program because I want to respect your time. But take a look at the materials again. Take a look at the collages. And please sign one of the two poster boards that we've done for you tonight. So right before we get started, I wanted to bring your attention to a few things that happened in 1969, right? A couple of things that are going on that are about 50 years old as well. So many of you will remember on July the 20th of 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first human to set foot on the moon, right? How many of you remember watching that, right? For you who love music, you'll remember Woodstock took place in New York. 400,000 people, probably the largest gathering of people to be entertained, and not only by music, I guess. Golda Meir of Milwaukee, Wisconsin becomes the Prime Minister of Israel. The first U.S. troops were withdrawn from Vietnam. Public broadcasting service was established, which included one of our all-time favorites, Sesame Street. Richard Nixon became president. Walmart was incorporated. What did we do before Walmart? Joe, we probably made a lot of money, didn't we? Let's see, Seiko introduced the first quartz watch. And for the bankers in the room like myself, the first ATM was introduced. APRANET was created, which was the precursor to the internet. So Al Gore did not create it. The Dow closed at 800 and gas was 35 cents a gallon. The Brady Bunch premiered. Don't shake your head like you didn't watch the Brady Bunch. I know you did. Diana, there you go, Diana. The Miracle Mets won the World Series. And who can forget Joe Namath and his famous boast that they would win the Super Bowl, and lo and behold, they did. Special Olympics turns 50 next year. Many folks in this room have been very involved with our local Special Olympics. Another TV show Diana probably watched, Marcus Welby, premiered in 1969. The first artificial heart implant was performed in 1969. And again, Diane, I got to keep picking on you, dear. Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 premiered on the Ed Sullivan Show. And for us that are getting a little older, the very first hip replacement took place in 1969. So we have some rather interesting things that took place 50 years ago, not the least of which is the Catawba Valley YMCA. So as you enjoy the rest of your meal, I do want to get started. And let's see, there was a fellow who got us started 50 years ago. And we're going to let him get us started tonight again. Where's Bob? Oh, there he is. Has everybody had a chance to meet Bob Mize and his lovely wife? I did. Steve did. Thank you. Steve did. All right. Well, Bob says that he can't talk in less than 45 minutes. So we've got a problem already. But I'll tell you, he has such great insight on what it took to get this place established. And I've asked him to maybe share a few thoughts about what it was like to get us started. Mr. Mize?
Thank you. I married a Methodist preacher's daughter. She finally got me down to 20-minute sermons. I was invited in the fall of '68 to come down for an interview. I'd started a YMCA in Charlottesville, Virginia. Met with the charter board among those that were here was Jerome Bolick, Leroy Lale, Adrian Shuford, Hugh Moretz, Leonard Moretz, Chauncey Setzer, Ned Jarrett, among others. We had a meeting on Thursday and had a brief meeting with the executive committee. On Friday, met for lunch down at Jackson Buff, and we had luncheon, and they grilled me pretty good, and they went into a session and invited me to come down as the executive to start the YMCA of Catawba County. Friday night, Stein Eisenhower picked us up at the Mulls Motel at that time and took me to the Newton Conover football game. During the first 100 days I was in Catawba County, I had the privilege of speaking to 121 groups. I had breakfast meetings, luncheons meetings, and dinner meetings. We started doing a survey of program interest in the county. From that, we built our design of a program. But during the first month here, they asked me to present a budget for the first year and the second year of operation. It was interesting. The executive committee funded the first year's budget sitting around the table. Then they had the full board meeting and funded the budget for the first year and second year. Ned Jarrett chaired the first charter membership campaign for a YMCA in Catawba County. We had 100 people were invited, and we signed up 100 charter members. And as Ned said, no less than $100 to be a charter. Ned would like to have been here tonight, but he could not be. Went to church with him yesterday, or Sunday. It was very interesting to start a YMCA. That was the 7th one I had the opportunity of being the organizing director. The people of Catawba County really poured out. Really had hoped that we'd get more from Hickory at that time, but we had a tremendous fitness program using the old Conover School. And then we bought a circuit trainer for weightlifting in the old cafeteria while the building was being built. Several folks here attended some of the first fitness classes. But one of the funniest stories I can tell now, state troopers become very involved in youth programs in the county. The first day I was on the job, I drove by the two troopers parked at the shopping center there in Conover. And Willie Plummer, one of the troopers, said, I want you to get in the car with me. I'll show you where the building needs to go. And he said, I've been looking ever since I heard we was going to get a Y. He picked out the site that the committee picked out. But on one occasion, 6 of the troopers wanted to play volleyball. We were in the old Conover School gym, and they said, show us what it's all about. We've never played that much volleyball. So I said, okay, I get 3 hits. You 6 get on the other side. I was not supposed to tell that, but I can now. Some of them are dead. I played 2 games against them, beat them 2 games, 1 on 6. The board allowed me to serve as the chairman of the National Volleyball Championships in 1976 or 74, which led to being honored as one of 2 outstanding leaders in the United States in volleyball by the U.S. Volleyball Association. That was one of the joys of getting involved. Volleyball started in this area. I refereed a lot of college games. Also was involved with the committee when they was building the gymnasium, new athletics facility at North Ryan back in those years. But to come back for the 50th anniversary is a real treat at age 86. And just have one quick story that I want to tell. Where's Johnny Moretz? Did Johnny run out on us?
His wife's a little under the weather, so he had to leave.
Okay. His dad, Hugh, said, you got to raise that boy. When he was playing football at Lenore Ryan, he came to me and said, can you get me a pair of shoes like these that was in a magazine? And I said, yeah, I can find them. I got them through one of my friends that was an international volleyball ref, and a pair of shoes was shipped from Japan for Johnny to play football in at the LR. There have been several of those guys that are now involved heavily in the Y, and I'm very grateful for the years that you allowed me to be the organizing director. Thank you.
Bob, thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Bob and his lovely wife now live in Maryville, Tennessee, so they made it a weekend and a week. But thank you so much for both of you for taking the time. Again, this is the guy that kicked it off 50 years ago, so it was only appropriate that he kick it off tonight. Now, I have a few people on my list that have agreed to sort of make some comments or talk, but we want this to be your event. So if you have a thought or a memory that you would like to share, please raise your hand, because I think it's fun to hear some of these kind of stories, the Johnny Moe stories about needing a pair of cleats from Japan, of all places. But we have a couple of other former CEOs here. Gary, why don't you stand up, say hello to everybody. And Phil DeCasolo, where's Phil sitting? Where's Phil? Phil. We've had lots of directors over the years, but those two guys really were 2 that I got to know very well, and I'm a better person for their involvement in our YMCA. So who has a story they want to share before I volunteer one of you? Steve? Okay, thank you, Steve. Steve has been a former CVO, and we appreciate his stories.
Yeah, well, thank you for all being here, and thank you for what you're doing. But, I came along probably at the best time the Y could have personally, and it was because I actually got to work and serve for two directors, Gary, and I got to serve under Phil, which was a wonderful opportunity. But more importantly, growing up as a native of Hickory and being under the watchful eye of C.O. Miller and Carolyn Miller, we were at the time building the teen center, and we were bridging that relationship, Carolyn, between Hickory and the Y. And this lady right here, besides my mom and my wife, is one of the most important women in my life right here, because she took care of all of us growing up. And I was just so blessed to have been part of bridging that relationship of the Y and the foundation together with a new building, and also serving the Y was just the best experience I've ever had, and watching these young kids grow up, and I'm glad to see this tonight. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Steve. Let's give Steve a hand. All right. We've had a couple of volunteers, or a volunteer that's spoken, and we've had a former CEO. But now I've got to give the microphone to someone that has spanned a lot of years. So this is our, 50th anniversary? Diana has seen 30 plus of those anniversaries. So Diana, I've got to have a couple of thoughts from you, dear. And she made me, she said, listen, I'll speak, but I've got to have a glass of wine first. So we did that.
I thought I was going to be last, so I was hoping that maybe everybody would speak and take up the whole amount of time and I wouldn't have to talk. But seriously, I feel like I'm going to beat Steve Mull in his comment. I have had the pleasure of working for every CEO in this organization with the exception of Bob Mize, who I think I came right after he left. So he's the only CEO I haven't been able to work for, and I've loved them all. I started with the Y when I was 19 years old. They hired me part-time when I was going to college. When I graduated, I started full-time, and I've been with the Y ever since. I met my husband, Butch, at the Y. We got married. We have two beautiful children, my daughter, Kara, my son, Lane. My daughter started at the Y when she was 16 as a lifeguard. 19 years later, she's the branch executive for the Shuford YMCA. So the Y is truly, truly my family. My husband has worked out at the Y since it started out in the Conover School building. So he's a legend with Bob before I knew him. And I just wanted to say thank you. I have been truly blessed for 39 years with the YMCA, and I hope I get to serve 39 more. So, thank you.
It's interesting because as many of you know, I'm very involved in a lot of things in this community, and for everybody that I talk to, they think she's the director. So Phil, Gary, Nat, Bob, don't flatter yourselves, guys. These are the real directors. Gary?
Can't let a microphone go by. I got to sell. But first of all, I'd like to say that it's different for me having a meeting in the evening. All of my meetings were with Lynn. And guys, what time was Lynn's meetings? 7 a.m. Boy, I said, Mary, Lynn's having a meeting. I got to get up early. So, Lynn, thank you. But what I want to say, I think is extremely important to me at my time of life. I want to say thank you. Joe Long. Thank you, Joe. Carol Robinson with Chick, Dorothy with Shuford, Mr. Bolick, Jerome, thank you. George, I look around this room and I see who I had breakfast with. The same people that were there then are here now. This is what this YMCA means. And I swear, I get a little teary when I remember my times with Adrian Shuford. And I have always said, I will never let that man's memory lapse. He was one outstanding person. And my memories are with these people who still follow the Y in that tradition. It can't be beat, ladies and gentlemen, because it's a passion, it's a mission, and it gets in your heart. And then, David Milholland, your folks, I had a wonderful time at the Y. I was able to go see these people with my hand in my pocket, a lot of the times to help build the Y. But we cannot let this tradition and this memory ever go away, because we've got a great team here today that's going to take it to the next level, and there is a place for the YMCA in Catawba Valley. I just did a little bit, but I'll tell you one thing. The people that I was surrounded around got me up and going every day to work for the Y. Their hearts are so full, and they build communities. And it was the first place. I've been to Jacksonville, Florida. I've been to Sumter, South Carolina. I've been to New Orleans. But the group of volunteers that are represented in this room and the spirit that we carry forward is just amazing for an organization to have. And I couldn't let this go by, Carol. That Chick Robinson, he's big time with me. So I just want to say I had a great opportunity. I thank each and every one of you who support the Y, and I hope you will share that passion as we go forward.
Wow, thank you. When I moved here in 1986, there was one lady who I met pretty early. And she said, Daryl, if you really want to be successful in this community, you got to teach people how to collaborate. And I don't think there's a better collaborator in this room than Miss Lynn Lale.
Well, thank you, Daryl. As I came here tonight, I was thinking about all the things with the YMCA, and I especially thought about Adrian and what he has meant to it. You know, he gave the land, he gave the money, and there were times when we struggled and we had to go to Adrian and ask him for help. So I think he'd be very pleased to know that we were celebrating 50 years tonight. And I also have to say that during the time that I was really active in the Y, that Chick Robinson was truly my mentor. And I could call him anytime, and he would always take my call. And I'm sure I called him many more times than he wanted me to. But he would always take my call and give me good advice. So those are things that I remember about the Y. The one thing I want to say about the 7 o'clock in the morning meetings, I always thought it was George Moretz that wanted to meet that early.
Thank you, Lynn. I had the pleasure of being Chick's banker for a few years, and he was a very tall individual, as most of you remember. And I had a little Mazda 929 that had a nice sunroof, and Chick would always say, Daryl, would you close that sunroof? My head's getting a little sunburned, so I'd have to close the sunroof. Anybody else before I pick someone else? These stories have been fabulous. Anybody else? Just, thank you. That's Carolyn. Thank you.
I didn't come here planning to say anything. I came here to support my husband, who has been very involved with the Y several generations now. But for me, I would like to say I have two memories of the Y. One is CO telling me not to drink any more vanilla Cokes at the fountain because he could always mix them up for us. And I remember many times talking to Carolyn, and I've already talked with her tonight. I don't know where you are, but she knows what a special relationship that they both had with kids. And our youngest one was a tennis player. And it was at the Y that he began his tennis career. He is now, I think how old he is, 47-ish, and still playing tennis. And I thank so much what the Y did for, that Kathy Kim was there when that program was started. Many kids' lives were changed because they could come to the Y, and as parents, we knew they were safe. They were surrounded by people who loved them and cared about them, and they knew they were going to be better people for having been involved with the Y. So I thank all of those before us.
Thank you, Carolyn. Speaking of tennis, Alan has been so involved in the tennis program, and he's been involved with Kathy and others, and I'd love for Alan to maybe talk a little bit about what the tennis program has been over the years.
Thank you. 87. Hey, I hope everybody's doing okay. I feel like I shouldn't even be speaking. I feel like I'm in a room full of royalty. You know, this is amazing. All you guys, I've learned so much from, George, Steve, Daryl, all of you, and Daryl and I know we've raised a lot of money. What did we chair for 3 years in a row? It was called the Children's Campaign, and it was 3. No. We raised a lot of money. But speaking of raising money and speaking of tennis, I've got a funny milestone that Daryl wanted me to talk about. If you remember, back in 2008, there was a Guinness Book of World Records to be broken. And I got a phone call in March of 2008 from a guy named Vince Johnson. I'm sure all of you know Vince. He's the son of the famous Harold Johnson, the big guy on Channel 9, the weatherman. Anyway, Vince is a wealth manager downtown with BB&T, and he called me up one day and he goes, "Finley, I've got a great idea for raising money." I'm like, uh-oh. So he's like, I know how we can raise at least $50,000 just in one weekend. I said, "What do we need to do, Daryl?" And he goes, "All we need to do is play tennis for 50 hours, nonstop." I'm like, I knew Vince was crazy, but I didn't know he was that crazy. But anyway, somehow we were able to pull it all together with a bunch of sponsors and, of course, the courts at the Y. Gary, I think you were there, or maybe Phil at that time. But somehow we pulled it off and we broke the record. We started playing tennis on Friday at noon and ended at noon on Sunday, nonstop. We had 5 minutes per hour to rest. I'll spare you all the gory details, but there was a lot of Advil involved, a masseuse, and a couple of doctors. But anyway, somehow we made it. We raised $50,000 from that event, and the capital campaign that we had going at the same time for the courts raised another $150 with Steve and all of you in the room. So $200,000 was raised for new lighting, 6 new courts, drainage, bleachers, you name it. And we did it in honor of, or we named the campaign after Kathy Kim. And I talked to Kathy today at a funeral of all places, and she assured me that she worked for the Y for 37 years. So how about a big hand for Kathy Kim? That's amazing, 37. And she worked for, as you well know, very, very little salary. And a lot of people don't know, she pulled money out of her own pocketbook for kids, rackets, outfits to take them to USTA tournaments, shoes, even socks for underprivileged kids. She's amazing, and she's still teaching today at J.C. Park. We did another world record and helped, along with the city, raise another $1 million for the J.C. Park, Hickory City Park. If you haven't seen it yet, go stop by. I know that has nothing to do with the Y, but still, Kathy Kim, anyway. But, there's several kids from this area that have gone on to play Division I tennis because of her. They started, Rom Teague, Andrew Crone, Emily Mauser, our daughter Madeline. The list just goes on and on. So it didn't stop just with little kids and teenagers. They went on to become something because of her. So anyway, just another, I know I'm getting long-winded, just another milestone about the Y that, our YMCA, just another example, touches lives and changes lives, right? So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks, Alan. Who else? Who else has a memory they'd like to share? Larry? Great. Larry was supposed to MC this thing tonight, and he somehow wiggled his way out of it. So now you're going to get him.
I'm smarter than I look. Well, yeah. Well, good evening, everyone. Beth and I are happy to be here. We're natives of Catawba County, and we've seen firsthand what the Y has meant to this community. My engagement began in the mid '80s. My business was near the Conover Shuford Y, and I became involved there as a member. And somewhere along the way, pretty soon, I joined the board and became engaged in the activities there and with I guess the oversight. Mr. Shuford meant a lot to me. My dad worked at Jackson Buff. And I just have a small story to tell. But in 1972, he had an accident, not job related, but he had an accident away from work, and he had a number of surgeries over a period of about a couple of years. I don't know how long he was out of work, but he was in the hospital a lot. Almost every hospitalization he had, Mr. Shuford would visit him, and he would always hand him some money, give him some money. And so I idolized Mr. Shuford. And when I came on the board, and we worked together, and we're in some meetings together, and I know how much he meant to the Y, but he also meant a lot to my family. It's really amazing to see all the people here tonight that have meant so much. And if I do have some names I want to mention, and I'll probably miss somebody there, but the founders. But I'm sorry Ned couldn't be here. But the Moretz family has meant a lot, obviously. The Teeters, John is here. Monroe is here, and he and his dad were both involved. The Milhollands. Lynn and Leroy, and Lynn was our first, broke the gender barrier, right, Lynn, and became the first female chief volunteer officer, and inspired me. The Longs, the Bolicks, I think Marty Burroughs was involved, wasn't he? Wasn't Marty involved at one point in time? Chick Robinson. Claude Abernathy. I have since you mentioned, I didn't think about this until the 7 o'clock meeting thing was mentioned, and I want to tell a story, and I'll only mention one name, and it's Claude's. But I was a member of another board or organization in its early days, and we had 7:30 meetings at Mull's Restaurant, and we were in an early meeting, or a meeting in the early days, and actually it was CVCC Foundation, but Glenn Hunsucker was the chair, and Glenn couldn't be there. On short notice, he asked me if I would preside, and I agreed to. And at that meeting, which met at 7:30 at the restaurant, we had a member of the board who said at the end of the meeting, "These 7:30 meetings don't work for me." To which Claude said, "I agree. I make a motion we move it to 7 o'clock." Which was quickly seconded. I had no choice but to call for a vote, and it passed. And needless to say, we lost a member that morning who will remain nameless. But Landon Lane, I don't know if Landon's here, but Landon's been has done a lot for the Y in terms of the financial organization and management. And I want to mention Tony Pope, who some of us miss a lot, who I think preceded me in my time as a chief volunteer officer. Steve Mull followed me, and I'm sorry if I've offended anybody by leaving your name out, but I have admired each and every CEO that I have known. I think I did not know Bob, but I got involved after Bob had left. But I can tell you that the respect for him that was left in the people who followed you and everyone in the Y, how much respect they had for you. But those who have come since then, in terms of the CEOs, the passion and the commitment everyone has shown to the Y has been part of the success. And I just want to say that where we live here in Catawba Valley is a better place because of this YMCA. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. I would like to use this opportunity to, okay, I'm going to get to George in just 1 second, but what I'd like to do now is we have had an illustrious list of CVOs since our inception. And if you served in that role or are currently serving in that role, I'd love for you to stand up just so you can be recognized. So if you're a former CVO, current CVO, please stand up. Let's see who our leadership. Please stand up. Yeah. I'm telling you, folks, I will go into a foxhole at any time with any one of these individuals, and as a team, they have been outstanding. Thank you so much for your leadership. And we've had 4 women CVOs, Lynn, and then Ronnie Vondrell, Lori Alala, and now Lori Sadowski. And so I think our leadership has been spectacular since day one. So now I'd like to give the microphone over to George because I've been waiting all night to hear what he's got to say.
Thank you, Darrell. 40 years ago, I got a phone call from a guy named Joe Long. And Joe wanted to have breakfast with me. And he and Chick Robinson corralled me and asked me to join the board of the Y. And that started my journey with the Y. Joe also and Chick corralled me into getting involved with the Boy Scouts about the same time. So they've been mentors to me and brought me along in a lot of organizations. But Adrian was very involved at that point in time. And Adrian and my dad were good friends. I think Adrian served as best man in my father's wedding. So we've had a close relationship with Adrian Shuford and the family there. Adrian was the first one that talked about starting a facility in Hickory. And he had worked it out with the board of North State Academy. North State Academy was going to be liquidating their assets and going out of business. And Adrian worked it out where the Y could acquire that facility. Well, as it turns out, the city of Hickory had a different opportunity. They secured some funds, federal funds, and were able to acquire the facility a little more than we could pay. So that facility went to the city of Hickory, and they turned it into a recreation department. But then, as we were talking about opportunities in Hickory, the Foundation Center became available. And so through the generosity of the Shuford family, Charlie was chairman of the board at that time. Carolyn Miller was on the board. They did agree to let the YMCA have that facility as long as we agreed to keep the name Foundation in the name. And that's why it's called the Hickory Foundation YMCA. But at that time, it did have some needs that needed to be updated. So Paul Kersher was acquired to handle a $5 million capital campaign, which at that point in time was a significant amount to raise in our community. But Paul did an excellent job. Paul led us through the negotiations with the foundation board, was successful in that, and was successful in raising the money. I know I was involved in going out into the community and asking for money, and one story I'll share with you, Paul said, you're going to have some pleasant surprises and you're going to have some disappointments. Well, one of the pleasant surprises we went to this one fella who was involved in the business community and asked him for a $250,000 gift, which we thought was very significant. As it turned out, this individual company gave $500,000. That was a pleasant surprise. But the why, I think we've made the Shuford family proud of what we're doing over there. That facility is utilized fully about every day. And I think it's meant a lot to the community, and we appreciate the support that everybody here has given to Y, and it's meaning a lot for Catawba County.
Thank you, George. Let's see, who wants to be picked on next? Dorothy, talk about Adrian just a moment for us, if you don't mind.
Well, I think he's smiling down on us right now and enjoying this meeting. I don't know anything that meant more to Adrian than the Y. And I just told somebody a few minutes ago that we went to China and I played a concert. And we were invited out to dinner afterwards by the governor of the province. And everywhere we went, everybody would look at Adrian and think, what a great man. I mean, you could just see it in their eyes. And so I told the governor what a great man he was. And it just was right after Lynn had gotten this through to name the Y after Adrian. And I told her that he had a building named after Adrian. And but I mean, we were on television, you know, news, and they would focus on Adrian. So Adrian was a great man, and everywhere he went, everybody knew it. I mean, we went into Fort Worth, Texas one time, and the Worthington Hotel, and they took one look at Adrian and said, put them on the VIP floor. And, you know, this happened to us all the time. It was wonderful being married to Adrian. And, you know, when he died, I had a heart attack, and it took a long time to get over it. And I miss him too. But somebody said that he gave, I guess it was Larry, gave his father money when Adrian cashed his Social Security check every month and gave it away. Just handed it out to people who asked for it or needed it. Yeah, Adrian was a great man.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think we named the building after the right guy. Would you agree? Well, Paul, okay, Paul.
We've heard some great names invoked tonight. Brings back wonderful memories. I don't think we would have a YMCA in Hickory if it were not for George Moretz. George was the first one to start talking about it. He said, let's just rent a building, put some exercise equipment in there. And I said, let's do a feasibility study. Find out what the community thinks, where it should be, and how it should be financed. So I interviewed 50 individuals, business and community leaders across the county, and a surprising result. The preponderance of the respondents said the Foundation Center ought to become the Y. So George got a meeting with the Foundation Center board. We went out Tate Boulevard to First Plaza building, 4th floor. Board was sitting there. I carried the big box of feasibility studies, laid them out on the conference table, went through the whole process. Here's the result. They promptly told us to get up and leave the room. George and I went out in the hall and stood like naughty schoolboys. What have we done here? A few moments, Charles comes out. Come back in and sit down. We have voted to give the Foundation Center to the YMCA everything, property, facilities, the whole thing. Retain the word foundation in the name for historical reference, of course. Of course, of course. We had the capital campaign. George and Lynn co-chaired it. It's their campaign. Diana was my secretary to the campaign. Andy Wells loaned us a little office off of 321 back where the License Bureau office is. We brought in a desk and a typewriter and raised that money with their help and the help of so many more. At the end of the campaign for a celebration, since it was for the Hickory Y and improvements to the Conover Y, we had a celebration like on a Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock at the Conover Y, and then motorcade to the Hickory Y for another celebration. Harley Shuford was in the front seat of my car, and Adrian was in the back seat. Somehow, the Conover Police Department and the Sheriff's Department got wind of the fact that we were doing that. As we came up Tate Boulevard, there was an officer at every intersection coming onto Tate Boulevard, and we swiftly came through. When it was all over, sometime later, Adrian asked me to come down to his house. Dorothy, you were there, you remember. In the living room, over a coffee table, he handed me an envelope. He said, Lynn will get the same, another envelope. Lynn, right? And when I die, give this to the Y. It was his declaration of the $1 million endowment gift to the Conover Y. Adrian, a gentle man, kind and generous. Now, Lynn and George co-chaired that campaign. $5 million. Lynn and George share a common characteristic. It's in their nature. It's in their DNA. they can't help it. And next week, I'll tell you what that is. Unless you want to know tonight, if you want to know tonight, say yay. Yay. The common characteristic that they share is all for the community. Support, building up, strengthening the community, whether city or county. It's because they love you. I love leaders like that.
Wow. Okay, we've had lots of great stories tonight, and I think we all feel like we understand maybe our heritage a bit better. But I cannot let this night go by without John Teeter giving us a story.
No, maybe Steve Mull can relate to this, but I grew up like 5 minutes from the community center, we called it. I mean, I lived there when they had a zoo and the line would wake you up in the morning. I was into animals when I was a kid. I mean, I used to ride the train at the community center. I used to help them feed the animals at the zoo down there. We had a chimpanzee that let smoke cigars. I don't know if any of y'all remember that, but you know, they had Joe Bear there, the bear mascot for LR. I learned how to swim there when I was, 5 or 6 years old. I kind of wrote a chronological thing down here on what all I did down there. I played pee-wee football. I got my front tooth knocked out down there. Big deal. We played basketball. The wall, when you come outside the wall, when we got a little older, we kind of found out that girls were we were interested in them. I used to chase Carolyn's daughter around. I never caught her, but that wall out there in front of the community center, that was the teen center. That's where you met. I mean, we did stuff they don't do now. I mean, we had dances, we had bands. We bowled. We did everything when we were growing up. We were pretty stupid, too, some of those times. I remember I played football in high school, and when football season was over, we'd come down to the center on the weekends and play tackle football with no pads. I mean, that's not real smart. Everybody got hurt, but Steve was probably there. I mean, we did some stupid things, but I moved to Asheville in 1976. I was gone for 25 years when all the Y transition came around, but as soon as I moved back down here, I think either Ronnie Vondrell or Meg Glock grabbed me, and I got on the Y board, and that brought just so many memories back, because I grew up at the community center, and I'm like Steve, Carolyn, and CO and their family. It was like our second family, and God, the memories we had. I can't tell you everything that went on then, but if you did something that wasn't quite right, Carolyn somehow usually knew what it was, and you heard about it. But I just appreciate, I was lucky to grow up in the 60s around here, and a lot of folks my age, that was probably the greatest years of our life down there at the community center, and came back and got on board and tried to help the Y all I can, and it was probably some of the best times of my life, and I'll never forget it.
We are really drawing close to the appointed time that I have promised you we will be leaving. So we probably have time for maybe one, maybe two more comments. And I was walking straight toward Phil because we were not going to get away without some comments from Phil.
Thank you. I have to do this or else I'll be sleeping on the couch tonight. So I don't want to do that. No. But just a personal note, first of all. As I look around the room, every one of you has given part of yourself to my life in some way. And what I am today or what I'm not today is a little bit of every one of you, because you've been so kind to the YMCA and in general then to me, as an extension then to me. So I really appreciate it and thank you. You've heard lots of great stories. There are lots of stories. We replicated the wall at the teen center, but we didn't allow the same action to take place. Do you believe me, John? Yeah. In that famous tennis tournament or tennis event that you heard about, how many hours? 50 hours?
50 hours and 8 seconds.
And how many of those hours do you remember? Not many. One of the funny stories out of that tournament was in the middle of the night, well, every night I went home. So I'd come back in the morning and I'd just know that they weren't going to be playing, know the record was gone, know that we weren't going to get any money to renovate the courts, but every morning they were there. And one of the funny things that happened is a lady was in the line at Dunkin' Donuts or one of the coffee shops, and she happened to be talking about she was going to go down to this event that was happening at the Y, and before we know it, we had all these donuts and coffee coming from the coffee shop to try to keep people going. But in the middle of the night, the second night, you won't remember this, but the second night, it got very cold. Remember it got cold? Tennis ball, 34 degrees. Tennis balls froze, and they tried to keep playing. And they played all night and into the next day, and thankfully we had medical personnel that came and sorted things out that day. So really good stuff. But I've retired twice from this YMCA, and I'm not coming back, so you don't have to worry about it. But it's been interesting as you look at the legacy of people. And Kara, I look at your legacy and your family, second generation now. I'm executive director at the YMCA in Conover, the first YMCA here. So we've continued on. I appreciate all that you've done for the Y. I've made my home here. Sue's made her home here. So again, thank you for all coming, and hope you enjoyed those couple stories.
There was, thank you so much, Phil. And when we needed help, Phil jumped in. And he didn't stick his toes in the shallow end. He found the deep end, and he jumped in. Phil, we are forever indebted to you. It wasn't all water. It's a great point. And so here's what I'd like to do at this point. There was a fellow that Nat and I had a chance to sit down with last Thursday, and we asked him about his memories of the Y. And he said, well, gosh, I've got a few, but let me go get a couple of things. So Jerome goes to his office and comes back with about 1.5 yards of folders full of Y stuff. Now, I will tell you, I have had the privilege of being involved with Jerome on some business dealings, and he is very meticulous for those of you that don't know him. But I will tell you, I loved spending the time seeing the original documents where some of our business leaders guaranteed that first loan with First National Bank of Catawba County. But Jerome, I'd love for you to share a couple of your early visions of what this Y was going to be, because you were truly one of the folks who put the first shovel in the ground.
Thank you, Darrell. I'm not sure about all that, but
I am.
It's going to be hard for me to to tell all the tales that I could tell in 10 minutes or something. But the one I need to really share with you, I guess, is one that's prior to Bob Mize. If any of you think anything happened prior to Bob Mize. Back, and I don't remember when it was, at a Rotary meeting, when the Rotary Newton Conover Club was meeting at the White Pine, Dr. Bill McLaughlin came to me one day and said, I'd like to talk to you a few minutes after the meeting if you have time. I said, sure. So after the meeting, we went out and I sat in my car and with him, and he said that Adrian Schifford and a few people had been talking about a possibility of a YMCA in the area, and Adrian would like for me to sit in on the discussions, and he said, how much do you know about the Y? And I said, well, I hardly know anything. I know what it is. It's a good organization with a good reputation. But as far as their programs or anything, I knew nothing, basically. So he spent about 10 minutes going through what all he knew, that the YMCA offered in the way of programs. And I said, well, yes, I'd be glad to listen. And about 2 weeks later, Adrian had a Rotary program where he brought in somebody from the YMCA, and I don't know who it was, to go over what YMCA was. And then he asked me if I could at the next week's Rotary program stay, and we would have a meeting. And so I stayed, and I went to that meeting, and I thought it'd be about 10 people, but it was actually Adrian, Leonard Moretz, Dr. McLaughlin, and myself was all that was there. And the purpose of that was to discuss, was it practical to have a YMCA in Catawba County? Was that something that needed to be pursued, or should we just let it ride for a while? And I guess it was a feasibility study of sorts. And we discussed a lot of various things, and specifically we were talking about a YMCA in Conover, and that seemed a little remote to me. I didn't envision a YMCA being in an area like that. But we discussed the pros and cons, and then we put it off. We're going to do a little research in various areas, and then a couple weeks later we had another meeting of the group, and there was another Rotarian. I'm not sure who it was. I think it was John Weatherly sat in on the meeting, and we discussed things further about, is it practical to really have a YMCA in Catawba County? And we didn't reach any conclusions at that. And then we had a third meeting, and it was just the Adrian and Leonard and Dr. Mack and myself. And at that meeting, we decided that it was possible that we could have a YMCA in the Conover area. And then the next question was, were we all committed? And Adrian and Leonard had sort of been my mentors when I came into the Rotary Club, and Dr. Mack was my family physician, so I about had to go along with the crowd. But everybody was definitely sold on the YMCA. And at that point we decided, well, we need to expand, we need to go out and recruit more people and get things going. And we picked about 8 or 10 names of people we wanted to get involved. And from that, it developed into meetings, and of course the size of the crowd grew. The meetings, we couldn't have them after Rotary anymore because there was non-Rotarians. And the meetings moved around, some at Adrian's house, some at a restaurant, some at Jackson Buff, and continued to grow. So in early I guess that would have been 1968, in May, well, it's in the brochure, we actually did organize and form the YMCA of Catawba County. And that was a momentous time. But in looking back, actually the birthday of the YMCA in this area was probably the meeting that the four of us decided, let's go with it. And I don't remember what that date was, but in fact we had a baby that was born there, and we had to take it home and make it grow. And it certainly developed into all of this that we've been talking about today. There's a lot of other tales I've got, but that's probably the most important one. I would like to say we've been talking about the importance of all that we've done and all the people that have been involved. We really do need to consider that God did have a hand in this, and that if it's not just what we have done, that's been done through us.
Absolutely. Wow. So I mean, a couple times tonight, I got to admit to you, I've kind of teared up. This has been really cool stuff. And we may not wait 50 years to do this again, because I could do it again next week and continue to hear these stories. But to be respectful of your time, we did promise you to be out right around 8 o'clock, and I want to honor that. But I do want to recognize just a couple of people. I want the people who put this event on to stand up. Gary Knox, please stand up. Gary's been so instrumental in this. Diana. Nat. And as we talk about the next generation, I've got to be very proud to tell you that my daughter was part of our committee. Jordan, please stand up. Jordan is part of kind of why Patty and I get really excited. She left for a while. She came back. She now works at Lenore-Rhine in their graphic design area. So when we decided tonight we wanted a collection of pictures to sort of show our history, we just sort of threw pictures out there and said, Jordan, what do you think? And that's what she came up with. So I think it turned out very well. I know I have missed some people tonight. And if I've missed you, it's not because it was intentional, but gosh, thank you all so much. I do want to let a couple of folks finish out our night with a very kind of quick closing. So I'd like to turn it over to our current CEO and current CVO, Nat Auten and Lori Sadowski.
I'm going to say just a few words for the next hour, so just bear with me. What I hope you take away from this event, and there'll be some people in this room who can remember meeting 6-8 months ago. George was one of them, and Lynn Lale was one of them, and John Shading was one. And we talked about bringing our family back together because we don't get together enough. And what I heard from this group is that you care about the why. And I hope what you heard from everybody else in the room is we care about you. And I think you heard that from anybody who spoke, whether it was Gary or Phil or Larry or George or Paul. You heard how much we cared. And it was important for me to bring our family back together. And I'm not talking, I mean, our family is huge. We got 20,000 people in the county that would call us family. But this is an intimate group that saw vision from a Rotary Club. And I think if you gave the illustration of you carried the Y along like it was your baby. For the first decade, it was probably like holding my 2-year-old. She screamed a lot, needed a lot of money. Yeah, it gave us a lot of trouble. And I think the first person that told me stories about Adrian was Lynn Lale. And she told me about how Adrian would bail us out of the black, or bail us out of the red in those days. And how some people would come and pay for our audits. I think Jerome was the first person to tell me that in Rotary clubs back from 2012. So I want you to know family is important. This is our family. You can't replace our family. There will be times we all don't get along. That happens in community. And we talked about community today. But there's a lot we've done right in 50 years. And a lot of people would want to say those same things. And I want to thank you for keeping people like me out of the ditch, because your leadership keeps me that way. Andy Wells has been extremely honest with me, and I can't appreciate, you don't know how much I appreciate when I come to you and ask for your opinions. Most of you are very honest. And I appreciate that. And, you know, all of you have been that way. Whether it be, I can remember meeting with Gary for the first time at Hickory Smokehouse. The passion in his eyes in my first month was the same, I'll bet it was 15 years earlier. Phil came by my office yesterday just to pat me on the back. They know what it's like to sit in a chair. They care. You care. And I want you to know how much I appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over to somebody who's smarter than me. Lori Sadowski, somebody else who keeps me out of ditches. So this is Lori, and she's our current CVO, and I'm honored to work with her.
I actually had no intention of speaking tonight. However, after listening to all these stories and hearing all this history, which I was integrally involved with all these years, I want to grow up to be just like you. But I also want to say we are so fortunate to have Nat Auten with us here. And we're so fortunate that he brought us all here together to be able to hear these stories, to share these stories, and listening to Bob Mai's stories of his work ethic in his first 100 days. You have nothing over Nat Auten. He did the same thing with meeting with these 120 leaders in those first 100 days, and we are so thankful and look forward to another 50 years. Thank you all for being here.
Okay, All right, I kept you 10 minutes late. I hope you'll forgive us 50 years. If you take 10 minutes over 50 years, that's a really very small percentage. So, Monroe, I got you out close to 8, but not quite. But listen, thank you all so much. Please don't forget about us, right? We didn't ask you for any money tonight, and that was on purpose. We simply want to thank you. But I can tell you, our facilities are aging. We will have a capital campaign, and we will come to you and ask for money. So just thank you for being here. Please be safe going home. And again, thank you so much for what you've done for our Y.